Welcome to the deep dive. Ever really stop and think about how much groups shape our lives?
Oh, constantly. Workplaces, our friends, those, online communities we dip into, we're always part of some collective.
Exactly. And understanding those dynamics, well, a lot of it seems to come down to this one key idea, groupthink.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Coined back in the 70s, wasn't it?
Oh,
By Irving Janis, the social psychologist. It's a really useful way to look at why groups sometimes make decisions that aren't exactly brilliant.
okay, let's dig into that. So, based on the material you shared from Mark's Knowledge is King, groupthink is it's basically when keeping everyone happy, maintaining that harmony becomes more important than thinking straight.
Pretty much.
Mhm.
It overrides critical thinking, stops people from speaking up with their own ideas. Getting along is suddenly the top priority.
Even if it means like ignoring huge red flags.
That's the danger. This push for consensus, it can totally block a realistic assessment of what the options are. The group gets tunnel vision on agreement.
And they don't properly look at downsides or other ways of doing things.
Exactly. Which, unsurprisingly, often leads to pretty flawed decisions. Uh, Poor outcomes.
Okay, but here's a twist, maybe. Because the source material suggests groupthink isn't always this destructive force, right? It's not automatically bad.
No, absolutely not. That's a really key point. When groupthink is grounded in solid reasoning, in, trying to be objective, it can actually be incredibly powerful, a real asset.
How so?
Well, think about it. You get different viewpoints in the mix, people challenging assumptions based on actual evidence. That's often where the really creative solutions pop up.
Stuff one person alone might completely miss.
Precisely. Ideas that an individual just wouldn't arrive at on their own.
Right. Like a super productive brainstorming session, but one where you're meant to poke holes in things, not just nod along. The material really highlights how this healthy version fuels critical thinking.
It does. And being open to challenges, willing to really consider different viewpoints. It's not just good for the group's decisions, it's huge for personal development, too.
How do you mean?
Well, when you're in a space where your ideas get a proper workout, respectfully but thoroughly examined, you learn so much. You sharpen your own thinking.
Makes sense. You become more insightful yourself. It's like everyone's sort of leveling up together.
Yeah, learning from each other's knowledge, different experiences, it fosters growth professionally and personally as well.
So a collaborative learning space.
Exactly. But, and this is big but our source material dives into, that positive dynamic really shifts when the intellectual reasoning, the objectivity, gets thrown out the window.
Ah.
That's when you start heading towards the, let's call it the danger zone, where mind control tactics can creep in.
Okay, so a shift from healthy debate to actual manipulation. How does that usually happen?
Often it involves very specific techniques, things designed deliberately to pressure people into just conforming, buying into whatever ideology is being pushed.
And the material uses cults as a really stark example of this, right?
Yeah, it does. They're sort of the extreme end, but they illustrate the methods very clearly. Things like fear-mongering.
Creating an us versus them feeling, like there's some big threat out there.
Exactly. A threat only the group or the leader can protect you from. Isolation is another massive one.
Cutting people off from family, friends, outside news.
Yeah, anything that might challenge the group's story. And then there's just direct manipulation, playing on emotions, vulnerabilities, building that intense loyalty.
And the whole point is to just shut down independent thought, make sure nobody questions anything.
That's the goal. The source talks about how this creates this really toxic kind of environment where you lose your sense of self, your autonomy.
Yeah, wow. And controlling information must be key there too.
Oh, absolutely critical. Discouraging anyone from looking outside the group for information. The only truth is the group's truth.
So you end up in this echo chamber, right? Just hearing the same ideas over and over.
Any different views are just screened out or discredited. It really warps your perception of reality over time.
That makes sense.
And the source also flags how language itself gets used. Propaganda, specific jargon.
How does that work?
Well, controlling the language creates a really strong sense of belonging. We understand this. Outsiders don't. It builds unity.
But it's a unity based on, well, not questioning things.
Exactly. It can lead to this kind of blind loyalty where it feels almost impossible, like a betrayal, to think critically or use language the wrong way.
Your whole way of seeing the world gets shaped by the group's narrative.
Completely.
And it's chilling, but the source points out this isn't just about cults or extreme groups. These dynamics can show up in more normal places.
That's such an important point.
Yeah.
Think about a really toxic workplace.
Okay.
Maybe there's intense pressure to just agree with the boss or toe the company line, even if you think it's wrong.
Yeah, I can see that. You don't want to rock the boat.
Right. And that pressure stifles different perspectives, new ideas. It actually holds the whole organization back, stops innovation, limits growth.
So for us, just navigating daily life, how do we spot the difference? How do we know if a group we're in is healthy collaboration or if it's sledding towards that mind control end of things?
The absolute key difference, and the source is really clear on this, is whether critical thinking and individual autonomy are present
Mm-hmm.
and crucially valued.
So healthy groupthink wants you to question things.
Yes, it encourages challenges, debates ideas based on reason and evidence. It expects ideas to be tested, poked at.
You feel safe saying, hang on, I'm not sure about this, without being shut down.
Exactly. Your concerns are actually heard and considered.
Okay.
Contrast that with mind control tactics, where the whole aim, stated or not, is to suppress critical thought, to push conformity, make people accept things without question. Dissent is discouraged, maybe even punished.
Right. So pulling this all together then, this deep dive, drawing on Marx' knowledge is king, it really shows this two-sided coin, doesn't it?
It really does. Group dynamics can be amazing engines for solving problems, for learning, for growth, if they're based on that intellectual honesty and objectivity.
Yet that same human need to fit in, to agree, it can become really dangerous if those foundations crumble.
Yeah, when manipulation takes over, it just eats away at your ability to think for yourself, your autonomy.
It really hammers home how important it is to, well, pay attention to our own thinking, to always question things a bit, especially when we're in a group setting.
Definitely. And that brings us to something for you, the listener, to really chew on. Think about the groups you belong to, work teams, social circles, online forums, whatever they are.
Are they places where it feels okay to disagree, where ideas get a real discussion?
Or do you feel subtle, or maybe not so subtle, pressure to just go along with the flow, unquestioning conformity?
Yeah, what are those maybe hidden ways group dynamics might be shaping how you see things, the choices you make?
It's definitely worth some ongoing thought. Really important stuff to reflect on.